All right, a final race for selectmen. We have two candidates for one position, Nancy Hyde and Ellen Larkin Rawlings. All right, for an opening statement, let's start with Ellen Larkin Rawlings.
I'm Ellen Larkin Rawlings, and I want to be one of your selectmen. I grew up in Westwood in a family that was very involved with public service, and it's always been important to me. We returned because my husband and I want our daughter Adia to have access to the great schools and community that I remember. I have 24 years' experience in the business world, 15 years of that managing high-performance teams. I'm involved with several groups in town, and I regularly attend meetings of several boards. I want to know what's going on in town and participate in those conversations. If elected, I will provide a fresh perspective and a new voice that represents our residents. The last few years, we've spent over $31 million on municipal improvements, and we're looking at several additional projects. I absolutely support progress and investment in our resources, but we must ensure that continued growth does not come at too high a cost, both financially and to our town's character. Tax revenue has increased as a result of University Station, but the average tax bill has still increased a total of about $700 over the past 5 years. Many residents are asking why we've not fully realized the residential tax relief promised from University. Last year, Brigham and Women's paid New England Development $8.25 million for a 4-acre parcel at University, of which only 38,000 square feet will be taxed at the full commercial rate. The pilot agreement negotiated and approved by the Selectmen brings Westwood $300,000 payment instead of taxes to cover 8 years, and subsequent tax payments at 25% of the commercial rate per the IRS for nonprofits. I will work to ensure that any further deals requiring the board's approval bring us the highest possible financial return. We also need to make more strides in providing ways for our seniors to stay in Westwood. The Aid to the Elderly and Disabled Relief Fund is a really wonderful start, especially Selectman Walsh and Mr. Ahern's suggestion of a donation match from the Selectmen's Reserve Fund. We still need to explore creative solutions, potentially work with the Housing Authority's nonprofit arm or other nonprofits to help provide more and better opportunities that would also help maintain our 10% SHI goal in a meaningful way. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. I'm Nancy Hyde, and I'm running for re-election to Westwood's Board of Selectmen, and I respectfully ask for your vote on Tuesday, April 24th. And I want to thank the League of Women Voters for putting together today's candidates forum. This has really been a very good event. My husband and I are 30-year residents of this great town. Our 3 children attended Westwood schools and are now college graduates. My twins, Nathan and Sarah, graduated from Brown University just last spring, and my older daughter, Carrie, graduated from Rhode Island School of Design. I myself am a graduate of Brown University. I have a degree in economics, and I have an MBA in finance from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. In addition to my 15 years on the Board of Selectmen, my professional experience has been in the fields of portfolio management and economic development. And I'd also like to add that I'm a trustee at my alma mater, and I previously served as president of its alumni association. I've always believed in being an active member of this community. I began with serving on the town's Finance Commission and spent 2 years as chair of that commission, and I was also elected to the Planning Board. I've served as Martha Jones PTO president, a Thurston Site Council member, and co-president of the Westwood Educational Foundation. We have a very strong town by many measures. We have a AAA bond rating, we have wonderfully successful schools, and we have an award-winning town management team. We are also very caring and compassionate, and we have a unique ability to support our oldest seniors and those with disabilities through our Aid to the Elderly and Disability Fund. We step up for our residents who suffer from tragedies and life-altering hardship, and we value each other. I hear from Westwood residents regularly what a great town we have and how much they love living here. And we owe it to those who live here and are well into their senior years, all the way down to our newest and youngest residents, to continue to make Westwood a place we are proud to call home. As your select woman, I hope to continue to serve on your behalf.
Thank you. All right, we've got some hard questions here. We'll start out with a hard one. Please, and I guess I will start out with Ms. Hyde and work back. Please tell us your opinion of the bifurcated tax rate. Do you think the current rate is appropriate?
Well, the bifurcated tax rate is essentially a split tax rate that taxes commercial property owners differently than residential property owners. Right now, commercial property owners pay 29 cents on every $1,000 of value, where residential property owners pay $15 on every $1,000 of value. What that has allowed us to do is essentially subsidize residential taxpayers' tax bills with the larger payment made by the commercial property owners. So just to give you a couple more numbers, right now, commercial property makes up 15% of the entire value of real estate in this town. But they pay over 20% of the taxes that come from real estate. It's a really important asset that we have the ability to have a split tax rate. It's a formulaic thing that's determined, and we've been able to accomplish this through things like the University Station development, which bolstered our real estate commercial tax base.
All right, Ms. Rawlings, would you like to address that question?
Sure. Mrs. Hyde explained.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Got it mixed up. Ms. Hyde.
No,
No,
you were right.
You were right.
You were right in the first place.
Okay.
Since Mrs. Hyde already addressed the explanation of what the split tax rate is, I think we're currently at about 1.7. The cap is 1.75. So I think that does make us business friendly in that we're not at the absolute top of what we could be taxing our commercial tenants and property owners. So I think that does make us business friendly. I think it is important that we maintain our split tax rate because it does afford tax relief to the residential constituents. One thing that I personally am concerned about is we need to maintain a certain ratio between the number of commercial properties and the number of residential. We have limited control over by right residential developments. So one thing that I find encouraging is one of the recent changes that's going to be made to the development agreement at University Station that will reduce the amount of new residential development there. With a new commercial property, it'll have to be 25 to 75%. And I would suggest perhaps looking at that in some of the other multiple use districts as well, because we don't have a lot of land left in town that we can develop and that's in zone for commercial. So I would encourage us to, sorry, it just got dark. I would encourage us to potentially reevaluate some of those allowances in some of our other multi-use districts as well, so that we can maintain our split tax rate effectively.
And that leads into the next question. You may already, each of you have addressed this to some degree. Has the university project been a success, and how does it affect your view of economic development going forward? I'll start with you and come back, Ms. Rawlings.
I think it's been a success in the sense that it's generated revenue. We've been able to put a lot of that revenue into our schools, and that's always a good thing. It's alleviated our tax burden to some degree, but again, our taxes are still going up. I have been asked by many residents, we thought we were going to have more of a relief. Why is that? I think that's a question we need to have an answer to. As far as it being successful, I do like the convenience of having the Wegmans and the Target. I would like to see some more smaller businesses find a way to attract them if that's possible. So yeah, I think it's a mixed bag.
Yes, in terms of University Station, many of you know that was a long-term, hard-fought, much process and planning development, mixed-use development. A few measures of its success. It has already netted the town over $5 million in new tax growth. It's not fully built out, but it has already met what was originally projected to be the new tax revenue to the town. So it will continue to do more. It's also generated to date over $900,000 of meal tax revenue to the town. So annually, we're getting about $340,000, $350,000. So the cumulative, since the restaurants had started operations, is approaching $1 million. That's added revenue that has allowed us to make investments in some capital projects. We actually have an article going to town meeting that will spend some of those dollars. Other measures of success, when we look at what University Station is comprised of, mixed use means a lot of things. In the case of University Station, it means retail, office, residential, hotel, hospital use. If you measure the success of that, the residential has contributed to our affordable housing inventory. The retail has provided places for people to go, to dine, to shop. Think of the hospital coming online. I was at Fox Hill Village this week where the director announced to the community of a couple of hundred people in the room that Brigham and Women's would be opening this fall. And there was that's great. He said, we're already working with them to talk about what services will be available, and they're sure that the people in that community, as well as people throughout our entire community and the region, will benefit from having that. So that's another measure of success. The hotel provides people places to stay when people come in town to visit, etc. I think we've all experienced it in different ways, but I look at it as it's just been tremendous. And I want to add one more thing. In terms of what the revenue has allowed us to do, we've been able to build a new police station and a new fire station without going for an override. And that is a huge accomplishment. Those are very important buildings to our community, and we did so directly because of the success of University Station.
All right, Ms. Hyde, we'll start with you and go back. Switching gears a little bit, how would you balance your vision for development with that of conservation in Westwood?
Well, any development that we ever consider has to give consideration to conservation. Back to University Station, when that was in the proposal stages, even with the predecessor project of Westwood Station, what was so important was that's where our well water resources are. Any project that was done there had to respect the fact that we had our precious water resource right there along University Avenue. So whenever any development comes forward, it has to be reviewed for its impact on wetlands. It has to be reviewed for its impact on our water supply, if that's applicable. It also needs to reflect our goal to preserve open space and create green space. So I'll give you one more example. When we planned for the new police station, which you all can see is now built, and the old building is coming down, what we introduced into that was the front part where the old station had been will have a substantial amount of green space. We need some added parking spaces. We will have that too. But that will be beautiful along High Street to be able to drive by and have green space. And the plan, and hopefully it comes together this summer, is that the farmers market will locate there. So it will be a gathering place and a great resource to the community.
Ms. Rawlings, how would you balance conservation against development?
I'm a huge fan of conservation. I do some work with the Environmental Action Committee, so I'm a huge proponent of being environmentally conscious and smart. One concern that I have about our town is that we have a lot of rock under the soil, so our drainage is subpar at best. So I think we need to be very careful when we add more impermeable surfaces like paved surfaces, and even rooftops count towards that. We need to be very mindful of that. I'd like to see us be a little bit more stringent when development proposals that we have a say in come forward, and impose potentially more restrictions on those kind of things and use the space to our best possible ability. I'll echo what Mrs. Hyde said about green space. I like that we're seeing more. I think we could even incorporate more green space into our developments. I know there's a requirement for it in the bylaws for special permit applications. I think we should be pushing for that harder. And I also echo what I've heard from many residents, concerns about the wells, because we are building very close to our water supply and the watershed. And one thing that I found of concern last year was there was a situation where it was brought to the town's attention where the developers were using a substance to salt the parking lot, which was salt, which they weren't supposed to be using. So I think we need to be really tight with those violations. We need to enforce penalties if people are using substances in those areas that is not appropriate and in violation of their contract.
Okay, starting again with Ms. Rawlings. What is your plan for providing affordable housing in Westwood?
I love this question. I think if possible, it would be good if we could up, in the bylaws currently, 10% is mandated by law of every new development to have non-by right developments to include affordable housing. I believe our current bylaws requires 15%, so we're gaining a unit or two here and there, which is a good step in the right direction. If we could raise that maybe a little bit more, not to the point where a developer would be unwilling to want to come and try and build something here, but it would still net us a couple of more units. I think that would be a positive thing to do. Another part of affordable housing that's of interest to me is not just the letter of the law and maintaining our 10%, but it's also the spirit of the law, creating real opportunities for people who would most benefit from them. Some of our neighbors have investigated options of partnering with nonprofit developers and building housing that's targeted, say, senior housing or young families. I would be interested in investigating some of that. If you're partnering with a nonprofit developer, some of the market value, the need for a commercial developer to make a certain level of profit is lessened or not there at all. Those are the kind of things that I would like to see us investigate to further our goal of not just maintaining our 10%, which is very important so that we don't find ourselves subject to a potential hostile 40B development, but also to further the spirit of what that law was actually intended to do, create opportunities.
Ms. Hyde, your thoughts on affordable housing?
So a little bit of a history lesson. The town for about 20 years has been working to create affordable housing and provide alternative housing to the people in the community. That goes back to Chase Estates development, Cedar Hill. We have, up until recently, our two senior housing apartment complexes, Westwood Glen and Highland Glen, both contributed to our affordable housing count. It's a technical analysis that gives you the affordable housing inventory. We recently lost the ability to include Westwood Glen in that count because it was not originally created to have the affordable housing in perpetuity. The property sold and the new owners did not want to keep it in have affordable units available for the residents. We also received news through state legal cases that informed us that the Bridges at Epic, the memory care facility, which we originally had understood appropriately at the time, the units were not counted in our housing inventory. That's changed. So the combination of Westwood Glen changing and Bridges at Epic being included in our housing inventory has led us very currently to be concerned that we may lose being over 10% when the next census is done in 2020. So we are being very proactive. It has included changing our zoning previously to require more affordable housing units when developers are proposing residential development. It has also included us taking action that we're bringing to this town meeting to have a $1 million appropriation that will allow us to invest in individual housing units, some that exist in town through our housing authority that we want to convert from rental to ownership affordable units. That will be one way we'll contribute to increasing our affordable housing count. There is the possibility, up to the town, whether or not they'll agree, that should a development go forward in Islington, we have an opportunity to add more affordable housing units through that. So we're already being very proactive, but this is an ongoing continuum of work. We want to provide alternative housing. It's the right thing to do, but we also want to do it under our terms. If we fall below 10%, any community in the state, if it is below 10%, excuse me, it would mean that unfriendly 40B developments, housing developments, could come in and circumvent our local zoning. That's not the position we want to be in. We want to be in a control position. We want to do it right for the town.
Okay, and again, starting with Ms. Hyde, what would you suggest to deal with the growing traffic congestion on Route 109?
It's
in 10 words or less.
the perennial problem. I would say it's grown, and something that is. The good news is we are in a great location in close proximity to Boston. The bad news is we are in a great location in close proximity to Boston. All that being said, we have to make the best of a situation. I was actually at a gathering on the campaign trail, and somebody said to me, I said, what is it you want me to know? What do you want changed? And the person said, close off 109, don't let people cut through Westwood. So I said, and I always try to listen, and I said, where should we direct them to? And she said, well, where I think we should goes through wetlands, so I don't think we can do that. That's it's our reality. It's tough, and what we try to do is we try to focus on public safety as a high priority. We have issues where cars cut through different neighborhoods. What have we done? We've created traffic calming because the cars were going through residential streets, zooming through where children were getting on the school bus. We do what we can with what we have. Geography is what it is. We always look when there are new developments at how to remediate where we can. That's a high priority when the planning board looks at proposals. We will continue to do this, but we will continue to be located where we are, and we have to realize that there are limits to what we can do, but we should never stop trying to make it the best, safest community we can as it relates to traffic.
Rawlings, do you have a handy solution to this?
Yeah, I'm giggling because it is the perennial problem. I've been hearing about traffic on 109 since I was a child, and I don't think it's getting any better anytime soon. I agree with Mrs. Hyde that it is something that we should absolutely be addressing as much as possible with any new development, because development, while it will add volume potentially any place we're putting it, it is also an opportunity to try and mitigate absolutely what we may be adding and even potentially what's already problematic. One thing that I heard talk of, and I'm not sure if it panned out, was looking at the timing of some of the traffic lights on 109 and some of the, not just the lights on 109, but from some of the side streets, and trying to work on some of the timing there, see if that could improve some of the flow. I don't think we're going to be able to do much about the volume, but if there's even small things like that, which probably isn't super expensive to reprogram the lights and put them on a schedule based on a study that makes more sense, that might help alleviate some of the problem. But I do agree, it's an ongoing issue. I don't think there's an easy solve. We're an attractive town. People are going to keep coming here. But we should at least look at some of those options that might take the edge off some of the problems we're currently experiencing before we add to them.
And here we have a good wind-up question. We'll start with Ms. Rawlings. Getting things accomplished is easy when everyone agrees. What is your greatest accomplishment that required you to navigate different points of view to bring people together to get a project over the finish line?
That's an excellent question. I'm going to harken back to my days at Lotus. Lotus had this model called high performance teams. I think it's popular in the software industry, which is where I come from. My background is quality assurance engineering, which is very detail oriented and very having to work within time constraints to bring out the best possible product that you can on the most responsible budget as fast as humanly possible. But you work with lots of different groups. You work with developers, you work with graphic designers, you work with people who each have their own individual stakes in this project and their own priorities. And I was leading a project at Lotus to build a database, which sounds simple. To build a database that was going to serve 2 or 3 different departments and manage a lot of data. So it sounds simple. It should have been simple. It sounds like it would be an easy thing to achieve consensus on. Everybody had their own idea about what we should be doing. The graphic designer's priorities were how it looked. The developer's priorities were fancy features. The quality assurance priorities were it has to work perfectly. I had to negotiate with all these different stakeholders to get them to come to consensus that it was never going to be 100% perfect, but what's an acceptable level of not perfect that we can release to the world and it will still be all right. With the graphic designers, that the look and feel can be subjective to some degree. We have to reach consensus on what's appropriate and fits the branding and meets the needs. And with the quality assurance people, yes, with the developers, that we don't need every single flashy feature, that we can make it solid, it needs to work, it needs to meet the needs of what it's meant to do, but we can't go over budget just to make it extra snazzy in whatever particular way they were thinking about that day. And we managed to get the database built and rolled out, and Lotus no longer exists, but I would like to think somewhere in IBM that is still in use. And we made it by our schedule and within our budget constraints.
Ms. Hyde?
Picking a project. There are three I want to mention and one I'm going to speak about specifically. University Station, we've talked about a lot already, so that was a huge project that I was intimately involved with through a lengthy predecessor project, Westwood Station, a recession, and then ultimately University Station. Another one that projects that are very visible are both the fire and police station, where I chaired the public safety task force that worked on those. But the one I want to speak about is the one we're sitting in and the building next door. So the long saga is the town aspired to build a new library. Where? Where the Colburn School sat, of course. The Colburn School sat empty, but it was a historic building. So what do? Not every project is linear and follows a nice path. There are stops and starts and reconnoitering and coming up with another plan, and that's what we needed to do. So years of planning to determine what we wanted for a library overlapped with years of discussion of what we were going to do with the Colburn School. At one point, we brought the Colburn School to town meeting for a possible sale. It did not pass, and we needed to sharpen our pencils and figure out again what we would do. And we had competing interest groups. We had a historic commission that very much wanted to preserve the building of the Colburn School in its location, which would have been right here. And we had the State Historic Commission that said, we want you to preserve it, but we'll allow it to be moved next door. We had the library commissioners who said, we have a grant ready for you for your new library, but we have to make sure the State Historic Commission is on board. They're a party to this decision-making. And we had the local library trustees and library users and library director who said, we really need a library, and it's best suited site-wise for where the Colburn School is. So we had to work with everybody, including our town taxpayers, to make a case that we were addressing all these issues. And working with all the groups, working with the community, we were ultimately able to gain approval. So some of you were here back then. We took the Colburn School, we moved it to the back of the lot, parked it there for a couple of years. We built this beautiful new building right here. We tore down the old library, which was non-ADA compliant, had the children's facility in the basement, only had one bathroom in the basement. It was a building that really didn't meet the needs of our community. It was subpar and old. And we were able to tear down that old building, and then over the course of a week or so, watch the old Colburn School get moved next door. We had an agreement, and town meeting approved us selling that old building, and it was restored by a party, a developer who had a historic architect who proposed reorienting the front of the building to look right at the library. So we have this wonderful circle here. All said and done, we preserved the building. We built a library that is beyond fabulous. Thank you, Mary. Good job. And we are sitting here today having accomplished all that with the community's support. And it ended up being a win-win situation that took a lot of work. And I'm very proud to have been a part of that work and working closely with other town boards and commissions and the community.
Right, that is the last question. You'll each have 1 minute to give a closing statement. Again, in that statement, please include how your constituents can contact you. So we'll move over to Ms. Rawlings and then back to Ms. Hyde.
As your selectman, I will make an impact on the issues that affect you and your quality of life. I believe my responsibility as your selectman is to serve our community. I'll work towards reasonable, responsible growth. I want to hear your ideas and work collaboratively with our town boards. As a parent of a school-aged child, I understand how important it is for the Board of Selectmen to work cohesively with the school committee and the district administration. I've also participated in enough planning board, finance commission, and other meetings to see how critical it is that all of our boards and departments are communicating. We will all work together for Westwood. I'll leverage the experience I've accumulated working with budgets, deadlines, personnel, and day-to-day challenges to help guide our town as we explore our municipal building options, staff our town services, and tackle our spending and taxes. I thank the League for hosting this event. I thank you all for attending, and I asked for your vote on April 24th. I want the opportunity to serve you and our community, and I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you, everyone, for coming here today and taking time out of your busy schedules. And I want to thank the voters of Westwood for the confidence that they've placed in me as your selectman. I want to say how lucky we really are to live in this community. Westwood is a small town, but we've achieved remarkable success. This is all part of a long-term strategic plan that I've worked very hard to help shape during my time as selectman. It is a plan that has sought to control spending, hold taxes in check, provide for everyone from those in our schools today to those that graduated from them many years ago, to making this place we call home as safe as possible. I've done all this while I've also worked to maintain the character of our town. I think the single best validation of the strength of this town is when those who grew up here, moved away, find their way back, including my opponent, but also including my children, their friends and contemporaries who see Westwood as the model of where to live and raise your family. And I am up to the challenge of maintaining Westwood's strengths and moving it into the future. So I ask you, are you better off today than you were 15 years ago? I believe the answer is yes. And if you have arrived more recently, you came here because Westwood is indeed a great place to call home. I ask all of you for your vote on Tuesday, April 24th. Thank you very much.